What do you think the spreadsheet crutch says about other enterprise software tools?
You mean like how how Excel interacts with these other tools?
I think kind of like that the other tools don't do their job, or the other tools are too clunky,
Hmm.
or simply put, employees weren't trained on how to use the other tools.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the this goes back to we talked about like just being intuitive to use,
Hmm.
usability, and for me, it's actually speed. The speed of being able to move data around and structure data in Excel. Just you can't it doesn't compete with any other SaaS tool because with SaaS there's like a server, a client, and there's always going to be a lag
Hmm.
sometimes. So I think the speed in which you can kind of put your vision of the world inside Excel, it just makes things so much faster. But yeah, I think there are other enterprise tools just don't have that flexibility that Excel does, and that's why you still see so many enterprise tools have the ability, give you the ability to export your data into a CSV or into an Excel format because at some point down the line, some analyst, some operations person is going to have to analyze the data coming from that enterprise tool. And guess what tool they use to analyze data? It's Excel. So
It's
it's
Excel.
yeah. An example I can share internally is that we use Salesforce as our CRM, and everyone hates Salesforce. It's like it's slow, it's clunky.
Sales, can I just interrupt
Sure,
you real
yeah.
quick? I was having this conversation with my sister too, specifically about Salesforce last night. And if she's listening, she's probably going to crack up. But like, I've been saying for almost 8, 9 years that Salesforce is a virus that enters maybe just your arm, one department at a company, and then somehow it spreads throughout the entire body and just takes over, and not necessarily in a good way.
Right.
So now keep telling us about how Salesforce is used at your organization.
Well, it's the single source of truth, the center of truth for all of our customer data or opportunities. The whole shebang. But when we want to report on how our pipeline's looking and um, what our opportunities look like, there's still some export being done into a spreadsheet or a table. And that speaks to the fact that Salesforce is not the best tool sometimes for visualizing your sales data. It's not the fastest tool for visualizing your sales data, but it's still the single source of truth. So it's kind of this tension
Hmm.
of like, I want to be able to see the data. I want to be able to see my sales data in a certain way. I don't want to fight Salesforce to be able to visualize data. So back to the path of least resistance. I'm just going to export into Excel, do the pivot tables, the charts that I know how to do, and just get my work.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I talk about enterprise software a lot, the tools people use at work. It's a recurring theme on Make Sense because I believe its ineffectiveness both drives macro system level problems and the micro daily frustrations most employees have with their jobs. So,
Mm-hmm.
despite investments in digital transformation, some companies just really still rely on Excel. And I think it's mostly just human nature at the end of the day. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you most people just want to do their job, get paid, and go home, and like not have to think about innovating on what internal tool I'm going to use to track my projects. So
Right,
it's a little
right.
bit of human nature. It's a little bit of like people just want to get their job done, and
Necessity.
whatever I can do to get my job done the fastest, I will do that. Um, and so, but
Hmm.
again, there are people internally who think beyond like just doing their job. It's like, how can I work smarter, not harder? How can I drive innovation within my team? Those are the people who are looking at
Right,
Product Hunt, checking out new tools, and challenging themselves and their teams on like, what can I do to improve my internal processes? But most people just want
right.
to do their job. So
Do their
and
job.
that's why Excel will never die.
Right. Right. I think it's interesting. The observation that I have is that you have some enterprise system, like you were talking about Salesforce, it's clunky or it's inflexible, doesn't provide the visualizations you want. So we start to export data, create the visualizations we want. A startup comes by and says, man, these people are still doing this thing in Excel. So I'm going to build a tool so that they can do it better, faster, whatever. So they get some legs, they get into organizations, but they too have to keep growing, and they eventually become the big bloated enterprise software system that is no longer responsive to modern demands. And the cycle of exporting a CSV to do your work kind of starts again. So we're in this cycle. We're in this cycle, and I'm like, is there an end? I'm not sure, because enterprise software teams just have such a hard time following through on projects. Just digital transformation projects stagnate, leaders leave, and then your average workers just, Excel is that reliable friend that is always there for
Right.
you.
Yeah. I think we talked about this during our first call, which was the cycle you mentioned, where there's like originally in the early '90s and maybe late '80s, like Microsoft Office and I guess Google Suite to a certain extent bundled everything together that you would need for like enterprise software. Like you might still have Salesforce, you might still have Oracle for like accounting purposes, but there really wasn't anything else besides Excel, Word. And then going
Mm-hmm.
into the 2010s and up to current, you have an explosion of SaaS tools. I think like we have like when we talk to our customers for my company, like I think we have like some stat where like most companies have like over 400. The average like enterprise has like over 400 SaaS tools and software. And
Yes.
so like
Yes. I've seen something like that
yeah, so
too.
we're in this part of the cycle now where there's too many SaaS tools, too many point solutions for some specific purpose, for hiring, for planning, for project management, for OKRs. And eventually the pendulum will swing back in the other direction where we need kind of like an all-in-one like tool like Excel that can or Office that can handle really flexible use cases. So
Yeah.
it's always I think the pendulum is always gonna swing back and forth. And yeah, that's kind of just my reaction to what you just said.
For anyone interested in understanding the enterprise software challenges, but also getting some hope and optimism for the future, uh, the podcast episode with Berman Painter talks about composable architecture, which is a movement in the digital IT world to enterprise IT world, to break down systems into their discrete functionalities so that we can kind of combine them like we do Lego sets. That's the example I use. So that teams can produce new applications on the fly on top of all the data. So someone could potentially come in and do visualizations that your company
Mm-hmm.
needs on top of the data.